Have you checked the children? You're a little mad sometimes.
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Sometimes that is better.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Long days and pleasant nights, fellow travelers along the path of the beam. I am known on this level of the tower as Jaime in Fuego, and if you please, you join me here for a bit of palaver on Hail to Stephen King. That is Reezy, obviously, Bienvenidos, and I welcome you to the horror show this Halloween. That is Reezy, and if you are stumbling upon this program, I have been doing Hail to Stephen King for, this is the 6th year of it now. So, ironically enough, started officially back in 2017, which was what I dubbed, at the time at least, and still kind of reflect upon as the return of the King, El Rey. That is right, my favorite author, as you can see by the Tower of Tomes behind me, but more specifically because in 2017 was where King was like thrust back adequately and just overwhelmingly in a lot of ways into the mainstream public consciousness. Now, constant readers like myself, I don't think that he ever really went away, but he was mainstream once again in 2017. And yes, you had unfortunate things like the Missed television series on Spike, and you had that awful Dark Tower movie, but you also had great stuff like Gerald's Game, and most importantly, Andy Muschietti's It. That's right. And so it was essentially like the reimagining of It. I mean, maybe King's greatest and most ambitious novel ever, but for the Gen Z crowd, I guess you could say, the Stranger Things devotees is probably an even better assessment of it. And I love the movie. I thought it was great. I still personally have a soft spot for the 1990 miniseries with Tim Curry, a little bit more so, but I did really enjoy it. I enjoyed the aspect that it was going for a full-on R rating because the book is very much R-rated with some of the violence, some of the language, so on and so forth. But that's not to say that I didn't think that the 1990 miniseries didn't capture a wonderful aspect of the source material, and there is a great documentary right now called Pennywise, the Story of It, that I believe is receiving a physical release November 22nd, but it is currently streaming on Screambox, and it's terrifically put together. It's from the same gang that did a great Pet Sematary documentary called Unearthed, the history of Pet Sematary, or the story of Pet Sematary, but I believe both of those are on Screambox, which is cool. And so, anyway, aside from that, there was an announcement a few months ago which honestly made the utmost sense with the popularity of Pennywise, this new iteration most notably. And, just tracing that back to 5 years ago, 2017, because that movie is just a little over 5 years old now. It was released in September of 2017. And so, even though I feel like King's, mainstream, let's adapt everything has kind of cooled a little bit, although it still does seem like every new thing that is released is immediately optioned. Like his most recent Fairy Tale, they're already like, yep, Paul Greengrass is making it into a movie. Now, does that necessarily mean that we will actually see it? Because, I mean, The Institute and Sleeping Beauties and so many other properties that were immediately scooped up, a lot of those we have yet to see in the small screen or the big screen form because it's just been dependent. They say they're making later. They say they're making Billy Summers. They say Ben Stiller's making Rat. Mr. Harrigan's Phone is the most recent thing that we've seen, and it was okay, but it is without a doubt, in my opinion, as was solidified by the 2017, and maybe for some to a lesser degree, the 2019 Chapter 2, which in some ways I preferred because I like flashing back and forth between the adults and, just their adolescent counterparts. I personally prefer that, which is how the book is structured, but the 2017 obviously did not do that, and that's why all the Stranger Things comparisons were made, not just because of Finn Wolfhard's presence, mind you. But it, and most notably because of Pennywise, is why it is even bigger than The Shining, and Pet Sematary, and Carrie, and The Stand, and Misery, and even the more dramatic stuff maybe, like Shawshank Redemption and The Green Mile. And so, obviously it is Stephen King's most popular and biggest and most well-known work, thanks to the 2017 film. And so, is it any surprise that The Simpsons, with their annual Treehouse of Horrors Halloween special that they do every October and have for 30-something odd years now, I think The Simpsons are in their 34th season now, which is just mind-boggling to me, because I remember when I was very young and on the playground when I was first or second grade, The Simpsons had just come out. Parents wouldn't let me watch it, Bart was a bad influence, so on and so forth, but yeah, they've been doing their Halloween stuff for a number of years. I think it was like the maybe second or third season when it initially debuted. But yeah, they've been doing it for a while, and they announced that as opposed to doing the typical trio of stories, which is how they've handled it for quite some time now, they were going to devote an entire episode to one story entitled Not It. Yeah, which not it. Yeah, obviously you know where they're going with that. But yeah, which it's kind of unprecedented in the fact that it's always been, you know, a collection of stories, and they're still doing a collection of stories. I believe next Sunday on Fox they're going to be airing that, so you know that is still to look forward to for, you know, you Simpsons devotees, however many are still out there, because I think the writing has waned in the last couple of decades. But hey, you know, to each their own. If you were still paying attention to The Simpsons and Family Guy and stuff like that, that I feel like has become kind of tired after all of these years, but South Park still brings it a lot of the time. Though they're not perfect either, I will definitely attest to that. But so just to have an entire 20-something minute, you know, 30 with commercials obviously, episode focusing upon this Stephen King story was pretty cool, and I was fairly excited. This is not the first time that they have tackled King stuff. King has actually even cameoed on The Simpsons before, and that's, you see the figure that's back there, if it's visible, I believe it is. I know it's a little tough to see with the collection of all of the craziness everywhere, but yeah, so King lent his voice to a cameo on a Simpsons episode, and then in one of my favorite Treehouse of Horrors, like ever, there was the episode where they did The Shining, and they were parodying The Shining, and you know, that also had like a Freddy Krueger parody. Damn, that was one of the best Treehouse of Horrors ever. So, Simpsons obviously have a just devotion and a respect to probably the most popular horror author in the world, although Clive Barker, he's kind of giving him a run for his money with his little resurgence with Hellraiser and, you know, some other things. But, you know, truth be told, Sai King is probably, since he stretches, you know, a decade back even further than Barker into the 70s, yeah, aside from, like, I mean, the Mount Rushmores, you know, like the Lovecraft and Poe and such, like, yeah, King is probably the most well-known as far as just stories and characters in the, you know, just public zeitgeist of sorts. And so, Not It. Just got done watching it. It aired this past Sunday on Fox, but it is currently available if you have Hulu. So yeah, you can watch the entire episode, albeit I don't shell out for the non-commercial Hulu. So I was ticked off because I've been capturing, like, you know, screenshots for this so I can have that little bit of information lent to the episode. And as I was trying to rewind, if you rewind back before the commercials on, you know, the ad-driven version of Hulu, you have to sit through the commercials again. It's not, I'm like, I sat through the commercials. Why do I have to sit through them again when I've already endured them? You know, Peacock and some of the other services do that a little bit better, where they front load all the commercials at the very beginning. I really appreciate that when streaming services do that, and maybe that'll be the new norm in some cases, although Hulu being owned by Disney, somehow my gut is not telling me that that is going to be the case. But so, yeah, Not It. My thoughts on this. I was quite entertained, you know? As you would expect, there are tons of Stephen King Easter eggs throughout, but, you know, the story begins, and I think they even released the first few minutes online before the episode was actually released, and so, yes, you see that you have Kingfield, which is what they're calling this town. I guess it's the go-to Springfield, Kingfield. It even has the rhyme scheme going down, you know, but it is dubbed in the 27 years before portion as a great place to bury your kids. I thought that was pretty funny, and then they're kind of panning around the town, and as opposed to it being a nuclear plant, it's a chowder plant, which is funny, and then as opposed to it being Lard Lad Donuts, it's Lobster Lad. So yes, you've got the main nods and stuff, which is amusing in that regard. And Barney is the stand-in for Georgie. Once again, you've got the rhyme scheme thing going on, and so you've got SS Barney and goes down the drain, and obviously that's where you get your first peek at Krusto, which is what we're calling our Pennywise stand-in. So Krusty the Clown being just manufactured. I mean, it's here on my shirt, man. I mean, I've been sitting on this shirt for a while. I've worn it for a few different King shows here on the channel, but yeah, so this, you know, albeit with this being Ralphie instead of Barney, but yeah, man, it just makes the utmost sense, and it does take place in the 80s, so this isn't really taking much of any nods from the 1990 miniseries with Tim Curry and Jonathan Brandis and, oh boy, so many others, that you know, dude from Night Court, whose name eludes me, but yeah, that had some familiar faces for the time that I appreciated. Kid from few different sports movies. Anyway, I digress right at the moment. But yeah, so you know what's going to happen to Barney. It's the callback, and there is funny dialogue throughout this, though, you know, where Krusto makes a joke, and he's like, well, anybody who says that, you know, they're funny is probably not particularly funny. And then after the demise and the disappearance being one of the big differences, so it's not like arm is ripped off and then they find, you know, the kid bleeding to death out there like what happens with Georgie. Barney disappears, and so Homer's character at the beginning after the death of Barney, he's putting up the missing poster, and there's just like tons and tons of missing kid posters, just like in the story, obviously in the source material. But there's a funny exchange between these two locals where they're talking about missing kids, and this guy's like, "Oh, children, they disappear so fast, don't they?" And talking in the very typical Maine accent, which is fun. But yeah, man, I really found the first half of the episode in some ways a little bit more imaginative than the second half, and I know that a lot of people felt the same way about 2017 versus Chapter 2 in 2019, but it was really seeing the stand-ins of certain characters specifically from the Simpsons regular, you know, universe, I suppose, as their Stephen King It counterparts. And so, you know, oh boy, I'm trying to remember Chalmers, if he's like the superintendent or what he is, but I know he was above Principal Skinner. But Chalmers is our stand-in for Bowers, once again, with the rhyme scheme kind of thing going on. So Chalmers is the Bowers character leading the bullies that are picking on Homer. And the interesting thing about Homer is that the way that they approach him, he is kind of an amalgamation of both Bill and Ben together. And so it kind of happens with a few different characters, because as you meet the rest of the Losers Club, as they call them, which entails Moe, who is the very obvious Richie Trashmouth stand-in. And then you have Carl, who is very obviously, based on, you know, the awesome color of his skin, you know, he is our Mike Hanlon. And then, you know, based on the fact that she's a girl, you know, you have Marge standing in for Bevy. So those make sense. But then it's where we get to Comic Book Guy, where it's a little bit weird. So you have the characters, unfortunately, of Eddie, and then even though he's probably the least developed of all the losers in both the source material and in the adaptations in Stanley, poor Mr. Uris and stuff. So that's where, like, it gets a little murkier with who, because obviously based on weight, Comic Book Guy has like the Ben thing going on, but then they take some of the traits in the second half when he has grown up from another character. I'm not going to really try to spoil this too much, because if you're a constant reader, and even more so if you're like or more of a casual fan of just the property of It in general, you're going to have a lot of fun with this, both the casual fan and the hardcore constant reader or constant viewer. And, you know, if you've seen just all the King adaptations and you haven't actually really read anything, or if you've only read like a limited amount or whatever, I think that both the hardcore fan and, you know, somebody who just enjoys King stuff on screen, or just a few of the adaptations, you know, you'll definitely find some enjoyment within this. But yeah, that's where, like, there's the obvious characters standing in for certain ones, and then there's the others where things are kind of altered a little bit. And that's because our young Homer character, the 27 years before segment, that he writes a amusing poem that I'm not gonna the chimp at the zoo, bananas for you. It's funny, but so they do at least forge into a little bit of a different essence of territory, but more so in Chapter 2 than they do in the first one. But yeah, you see the big rock fight, and yeah, the epic rock fight or whatever, and there's even the heavy metal music that is, it's not the Anthrax that they had in you know, the 2017 film, but it still takes that motif and runs with it. And so yeah, that's where the Losers Club kind of makes their formation, only 5 as opposed to our 7 in this particular bit. But yeah, then we go into the example of all of them reflecting on the fact that they had seen this Krusto, this evil maniacal clown, and Homer was the first one who saw it when the bullies were messing with him, just like, you know, where he's waving the arm in the 2017 film. But then they alter some stuff in a oddly amusing way. Like for Marge, she's talking about, I saw the clown, and, you know, she's like trying to like shave her upper lip hair or something, and they do have a fun cameo from the sisters, which is cool. But as opposed to blood, they changed the joke into like drowning in seltzer joke. I know it's very easy to rip on seltzer drinkers. I am a seltzer drinker from time to time, and so, you know, that's a thing. And then Moe, who is very obviously, as I mentioned, our trash mouth stand-in, he has something with a ventriloquist dummy version of Krusto, which is obviously a nod to the wind-up doll version of Krusty from one of the earlier Treehouse of Horrors, where, you know, there's like switch from good to evil on the back, which is so funny. So that's cool. And then Carl has one of our initial references to I guess it's really the only reference we get to the spider silliness, because he's reading a sci-fi novel as the Mike Canlon stand-in, and he imagines that he sees, well, doesn't imagine, he does actually see this tentacled version, which looks very much like the aliens that pop up in every installment of Treehouse of Horror, whether in a larger or a more limited capacity. And then Comic Book Guy goes into his, and he's like, yeah, he showed me the rotting corpse of my dead grandmother in a bathtub full of maggots, and Moe's character is like, yeah, we don't need a visual of that, just chill out. So that's funny. And so they essentially, after we get the projector bit, you know, which was specific, if I recall correctly, because it's been a few years now since I've read its source material, but I'm like 95% sure that that was a reformatted bit from the source material specifically for the 2017 film. But it's one of the most iconic bits from that film and incredibly effective. So as you can see right here, they do an amusing job with that. And that's when they determine, well, we have to go to the layer of this guy as they explore the backstory, and they're like, just, okay, he was vaudeville, and then he had a radio show, and then he had a television show, and he was never successful. And so they go to the Channel 14 abandoned television station in this 80s, incarnation of all of them being young. Of course, in true Simpsons fashion, they have to have a knock on Fox when they see that it was a Fox affiliate. They all shudder, which is funny. That was the thing back in the late 80s and early 90s, man. Married with Children did it. The Simpsons did it. Like, they all knocked on their network, which I thought was so just meta and amusing back in the day, and the fact that The Simpsons still maintain that, and in this episode they did as well. But yeah, so you can kind of guess where things go from here. It does veer into some laughter, and it mirrors much more so in the first half of the story how things go. And then when we flash forward to 27 years later, after the second commercial break of the episode, that's where we find out that Homer is grown up and he's the only one still in Kingsfield, which is now described as why are people still moving here, as you see right here, which is funny. But as opposed to Moe's, it's called Dose! And so he's the barkeep, and you've got Lenny in there, you've got Mole Man, which is funny. And then you even have little nods as the Losers Club is called back by this amalgamation of Ben and Bill, who is still there, which, obviously isn't source material accurate either, since Mike is the one who stays back and in any event. So yeah, you see there's, like, even with some of the decor, you've got the little misery reference, which is fun. But you catch up with Marge, and you see that there was some payoff from the joke about her experience with Pennywise that I didn't really like so much. The stuff with the grown-up version of Moe/Richie is fairly amusing, but even more so with Marge, because I don't want to really spoil the back half, because that's where there's some of the real amusing sort of nods and like Easter eggs and stuff like that. But there is a reference to a much older Simpsons episode where there's like these doppelgangers of Bart and Lisa, and they kind of tie it in with this multiversiness of the fact that this could be a version of Springfield maybe, and the fact that, yes, it's Kingfield, and so on a different level of the proverbial tower, this is what Springfield in whatever state, as they have never divulged, actually is, could be, which is funny. And so there is a role reversal between the Bart and the Lisa character with Marge, which is funny. And it's really when they go back to Kingfield along with their mother and the person who ends up being the father, and I'm not going to spoil any of that, but that's where we get just like the heavy-handed drop of a crap ton of Easter eggs, and it's when the Bart and the Lizzie character, I don't even know if they even mentioned what the name of the, Bort, I think it's, or no, Bort is from a different Simpsons episode. Bort, did you say my name? No, my son is also named Bort. I'm dropping all the old Simpsons references here. But yeah, so the kids, the Bart and Lisa stand-ins on this level of the proverbial tower, are walking around Kingfield, and that's where the Lizzie character has an amusing bit of dialogue where she's like, I can't stand Mom and Dad's old town. They misspelled Pet Cemetery, Salem's parking lot. So that's funny. And then they pass a shop called Needful Crap Secondhand Store, and this is where the Bart character, he is basically entranced by the green glow of a television. You all know that that is a Tommyknockers reference, but an even smaller little nod is the fact that you see the monkey from the Monkey short story from Skeleton Crew. So not Monkey Shines, to get that confused with the, I think that was a George Romero movie, if I remember correctly. So yeah, that's where there is just like a heavy-handed drop of a bunch of different references, which is kind of funny. And so it builds to a climax, just like with it, Chapter 2, a little bit different. Although it does tie in with some of the, like, there's a really great scene in It 2017 where you look up and you just see, like, a bunch of, like, apparition, like, soul sort of things. And it does a really fun recreation of that. And then there was also a very amusing swipe at Jimmy Fallon between the kids where they're like, he must get his sinister power from his captive audience, just like Jimmy Fallon. All you Jimmy Fallon fans out there, I'm sorry, I've never been the biggest fan of him. The fact that he couldn't even keep it together on SNL when he was on there for all those years. Goddamn, he was one of the worst at just chuckling live on TV and not being able to handle his shit, man. It was like, come on, dude, be a professional. I know Will Ferrell is funny. It is what it is. So, yeah, that's about, without spoiling too much more. I really, as a constant reader, as a Tower junkie myself, that's where I have to make reference. The only thing that I will say is you have to stay to, well, obviously you're going to stay till the end. It's like the last minute or so of the episode, but we do get our cameo from our aliens, and they make a tie-in with Pennywise's, or at least the entity that takes on the form of Pennywise and various other things. They make the connection with the aliens, which is obviously, like, book accurate, which is kind of fun. Our 1,000-year-old clown. And then they're like, they will cower in fear when they see what our next evil thing is. And they're like, a rabid Saint Bernard, and they're like, or how about a possessed car? And so this is where they just start name dropping all the King works that they can, at least as far as the noteworthy ones. Most notably from the 80s is where King solidified himself. And so, you know, they make the Carrie reference, they make the Shining reference, and as you look at the bookshelf right here, I mean, you've got all kinds of heavy hitters. You've got Dr. Sleep. Look how prominently shown the Dead Zone is, which is good. You've got Misery. Shout out to Dolores Claiborne, which is cool. Pet Sematary, obviously, and Salem's Lot being right next to each other. Happy to see The Stand, Needful Things, Dark Tower, prominently shown as well. And ironically enough, my two least favorite King books are shown right there too. Check it out, guys. Yeah, Dreamcatcher and Bag of Bones. But the episode is ended so hilariously with their determination of what the next just attempt at destruction should be. And they're like, Tommy Knockers! Tommy Knockers! It's hilarious, dude. I am a Tommy Knockers apologist, man. Not of the miniseries, but I like the source material. I know it was when King was at his most, you know, coked and sauced and, you know, just crazed as far as ideas. And yes, it's a bloated mess of a book at times, but I love a lot of the ideas. Guard is one of my favorite characters. But yeah, the fact that Tommy Knockers continues to be the scorn of so many, it's very funny. And really what just this further reinforces, I'm going to take a little drink of my, yes, shout out to homeboy there. That's right, Tim Curry. Check out that documentary, by the way. It's very good. But like the enduring just love of clowns, and this is something I have in the description of the video because it's totally true. If Terrifier 2 and all of the success of that torture porn craziness is any indication, which I saw in a theater this past week, it's not, if you're as desensitized as I am to gore and the scarific and stuff, and a lot of it's played for, like, you know, campier, cheesier laughs despite the excess of the gore, not quite to a same Raimi level or anything, but still, I mean, it's a very entertaining movie, great synth score, great performance from our lead lady. It's fun, and shout out to Damien Leon and, you know, David Howard Thornton. They did such a great job, and I'm happy that it's seeing so much success. But the success of that film is just a further confirmation of what we found in 2017 when it became the highest grossing horror movie of all time, is that we still have this enduring just love and fear of clowns, and I don't think it's going away anytime soon. They left it wide open for Terrifier 3, so look forward to that at some particular point with the money that it's making. But I mean, there's a Killer Clowns video game coming out. An underseen gem, at least for me, is John Watts. Before he was making those Tom Holland Spider-Man movies, he did a kick-ass film called Clown, simply called Clown. And it's one of my personal favorites. That one does not have anything played for laughs like with Art the Clown. I mean, this one is dark and messed up. I love that film. But yeah, it's just that I don't know what it is, but even back when I was going to like Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus, if I wasn't getting all tongue-tied and stuff, supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. Yeah, man, I always thought clowns were a little weird. I didn't have like that full-on phobia like certain people do, but just the success of that film and the fact that, you know, I'm sure that this special by The Simpsons will be very well received, and so I don't think it's going away anytime. It's been around for decades, and the point that I guess I'm trying to make is that I think Stephen King really brought a major amount of attention, initially with his book, then later on with the 90s miniseries and its enduring affinity and popularity, and then it was just reignited and reinforced with the 2017 film, and unfortunately to a lesser degree both financially and critically, and as far as fan reaction goes, Chapter 2, which I really enjoyed, aside from the weird barf sequence in the bathroom with Eddie. Everything else, I really enjoyed that film, and most notably the casting of like McAvoy and Chastain, and yeah, I dig that movie, even though some people very much prefer 2017. So I extend a grande gracias, everyone. I've been Jaime Fuego. I thank you so very much for tuning into this, hearing my thoughts on The Simpsons Not It, the Treehouse of Horror special, the first time that we have ever seen one story take center stage for the entire duration, which was pretty cool. Constant readers and the just casual, King fan will find a lot of amusement in this. I have been Jaime Fuego. You can find me on all social media sectors like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, here on the YouTubies. And also, just keep in mind that next Tuesday we are going to be doing the live book of the month, and it is going to be a discussion about the first Bachman story, which is housed back there in the Bachman books. It's called Rage, and it's a notorious one, for sure. And the last published Bachman book, which despite being a box book or a closet book, or I don't know, a drawer book. It was just something that had been sitting around for a while that King retooled and re-released in Blaze. And so, first release Bachman story and the last release Bachman story, since they're both shorter, we're going to be doing a double down in the live section. And yeah, look forward to that. Look forward to seeing all of you there. Gracias again for anybody who tuned into this. The liking, the sharing, the subscribing means a hell of a lot. We are going to be doing something live on this Sunday for the horror show. We're still not determining what it is, but very much looking forward to taking part in that, along with the founder of the Feast, showrunner Cecil, who is very stoked to finally be getting to shoot in early November Dylan's New Nightmare. So yes, stoked for that, stoked for everything spooktacular this month that we have had the opportunity to cover. And yeah, everybody, that's going to be the end of the proceedings. And until the Wheel of Ka comes around once more, hasta luego, cinemigos, constant readers and viewers alike, say thank you. I hope we have been well met. We share more of this palaver sooner rather than later. I was trying to get this to be right around 27 minutes. I don't know if I'm going to succeed with the edit, but we'll see. And until next time, Fright fans, remember to stay scared and read Stephen King. Yeah, if you have not undertaken the journey that is reading it, goddamn, I cannot recommend it enough.